So the New York Times dropped a podcast literally about 4:30 this morning, and they had Dr. Fauci on. If you notice, Dr. Fauci did not make an appearance on the Sunday shows, so for the first time in a long time. It's a rare occurrence, Kelly, when Dr. Fauci is not on the Sunday shows.
I miss them.
But we've got one of our producers listen to the podcast this morning, dark and early, so I promise you haven't heard the sound unless you were out listening to the New York Times podcast at 5 a.m. Dr. Fauci's weighing in on the lab leak theory. Take a listen.
As a scientist, I have always kept an open mind about things until they were definitively proven. So if an investigation gets us closer to that, then I certainly am in favor of that. The one thing that I feel we need to do, we've better make sure that any investigation includes people who have real scientific knowledge about this and get the political aspects out of it.
Rick Grenell, you know him. You know Dr. Fauci well. You worked with him. Is he? And I'm curious, what's the ego like on this man? Is there an ego there? I mean, last week he referred to himself as science.
Right. Look, I think a lot of people in this industry have big egos. Sadly, I think during a pandemic, though, we should have, and the media should have, used people like Dr. Fauci as a warning, not a be-all, end-all, not someone who made the rules, but who created warnings. And then public policy officials would take the healthcare warnings. And also, I think we should have brought into the room those economists who would be warning about the devastation to the economy, or mental health experts that would come in and say, look, if you do a lockdown, this is going to be something terrible for people's mental health. And then the politicians can bring all of those opinions together and make a decision. But instead, what happened, Dr. Fauci became the person who created all of the rules. And I don't think that that's something that we should have done.
Kelly, thoughts? I know you wrote about this just recently for the Washington Times. Basically how the misinformation over the last 15 or so months has probably cost lives because people would listen to the great Dr. Fauci, take that as fact, and then maybe not hear the correction 2 weeks later. Hey, we don't need you to wear masks. Hey, you can go on a cruise. Hey, and you can go on and on through the last year and a half. But what do you think? Is Dr. Fauci ultimately going to be one of the villains when this is all said and done?
Well, I think there's a lot to investigate in terms of gain-of-function research and what was happening at the Wuhan lab. The fact that Dr. Fauci was so quick to dismiss the theory early on after the president said it was a possibility and Senator Tom Cotton said it was a possibility. Secretary Mike Pompeo, a few weeks ago on a Sunday show, basically said, we have the evidence. And Rick would know about this better than I, but he's like, it's undeniable fact that this escaped from a lab. And I do believe this. And that the State Department was compiling the evidence and it needs to be declassified and put out there for the public. I don't know who Dr. Fauci thinks a reputable scientist is to investigate these origins. He's got a lot tied up into this, grants and money included, and having this not become public. So I think there needs to be a congressional investigation, and Dr. Fauci needs to be frank with the American public about what exactly was being done and being funded by the NIH at the Wuhan lab.
Kelly, I'm going to play a soundbite, and Mark will go to you for reaction. But here's Dr. Fauci on this again, this New York Times podcast, which just dropped about 5 a.m. This morning, talking about the flip-flopping on mask wearing. Take a listen.
It is essential as a scientist that you evolve your opinion and your recommendations based on the data as it evolves. That is the nature of science. It is a self-correcting process. And that's the reason why I say people who then criticize me about that are actually criticizing science.
Mark, thoughts?
My only working theory now, Rob, is he's purposely doing all this to annoy you. Because he's playing right into the caricature of a guy who's more concerned about himself and his own PR and his own elevation than he is to the public interest. He's obviously got a long record of hard work in public health, but right now just seems like he's purposely in conspiracy with you to provide content for this program.
Well,
Can I jump in here for a second?
Please, Rick, yes.
One of the problems that I've had with Dr. Fauci and how he climbs up on his podium is that inherent in the medical field is this idea that peer review is constant. Medical professionals will tell you that when they step out and they make a decision, that they want to be criticized, and all of their information is supposed to be peer reviewed. And that is one thing that didn't happen because Dr. Fauci didn't allow it to happen. His whole comment here, when you criticize me, you're criticizing science, is really denying the medical professional's oath to have peer review facts. He didn't want that. He didn't want his peers to review or critique what he was doing. He wanted everybody just to listen and follow.
I also think, Rick, and to Mark's point, I know Mark pokes fun at me here, but I think so fine. I agree, science is fluid. It's always evolving. But if you are the head of infectious diseases he's 80 years old. He's been in the bureaucracy now for more than 40 years. He worked on the AIDS virus in the early 1980s. Airborne viruses. Maybe people should be wearing masks. I don't think if I'm working that industry for that long that would have been up for debate when this virus first hit our shores from China. It'd be like taking your car to a mechanic, and this mechanic's been working on cars for 40 years and he doesn't know where the hood is. I think that masks probably should have been a no-brainer one way or the other. But I think that misinformation back March 2020, April 2020 about masks, I think that confused a lot of people. And ultimately, I think it probably ended up costing lives. All right, I want to move on. Tomorrow's primary day in New York City. New York City is the biggest city in this country. It looks like Eric Adams right now, according to multiple polls, one that came out just Sunday. Right now, he's leading Maya Wiley, who tends to be quite radical with her viewpoints. She wants to defund the police by the tune of $1 billion in New York City, Manhattan with the largest police force in the country. Eric Adams right now in that poll, about 21.3%. Mark, to you, what does it say about where we are politically as a country that a pro-police candidate is on the precipice of winning a primary, which ultimately will probably decide the mayoralship in the city of New York?
Well, we'll have to see if he wins first, and we're probably not going to know for a while. This ranked choice voting makes it very difficult to get a quick result and makes it very difficult to figure out what the result's going to be. Certainly, if you were forced to pick, you'd say Adams could win. And I think he's very smartly positioned himself as someone sympathetic to civil rights, but also tough on crime. And right now, as has been the case in most of our mayoral races, people have been looking for someone who can control crime. Even de Blasio had Bill Bratton as his police commissioner, someone with a lot of experience and a lot of credibility on these issues. So it's a big issue for New Yorkers, and Adams figured that out early.
Kelly, quickly on this ranked choice voting, other cities are at least looking at it right now, this being a possibility. As Mark said, this is the first time New York City is going to do it. Basically, you'll have your first choice, and then you'll have your second choice, and then the aggregate of those becomes the winner. Is that how they're doing it?
Yeah, and I think it's a mistake. And as Mark said, it's going to delay the results. I like to have an election day, and I like to have the decisions made that evening. It also brings up a lot of mathematics and figuring things out, and there could be a lot of room for error here. So I believe whoever gets the majority of the votes should win. And it should be a very cut and dry decision. And having had people make 5 choices is a mistake that's going to delay the results and provide some uncertainty probably with the outcome of the election.
How ironic is it that they polled, the New York Post polled 1,000 voters in New York. The number one issue by an over 70% margin, guess what it was? Crime. So I think that's probably a microcosm of many American cities right now. Panel, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Mark Halperin. Kelly Sadler, good to see you as always. Rick Grenell, what do you feel about day one? Pretty good?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good.
Pretty good. All right. We'll see you in just a minute. Panel, thank you so much.
Hi, Emma Reckenberg here. If you like this video, there's a whole lot more to see on Newsmax TV. You can watch for free right here on our YouTube live stream and be the first one here each time our experts break down real news. Just hit that subscribe button, ring the bell icon, and stay with us on America's fastest growing cable news channel, Newsmax TV.